Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our conscious conversation. My name is Shara Moscinska, filming in our beautiful meditation garden, and this evening we are blessed to have Gary and Jane Simmons as our guests, as they will discuss their integral ministry model. So let's take a moment to center with a little prayer. So I invite you all to absorb the beauty that you can see around me. And with that, take a few deep breaths. And as you breathe, allow yourself to relax. Allow any stresses of the day just to fall away. And bring your head down into your heart so that you are held in the alignment of heart consciousness. And from this consciousness we pray. Divine love, Mother, Father, God, we are so grateful to be here today in community, connecting, being nourished, being held by each other through those tentacles of interdependent love, even during this time of so much separation. We are grateful to be fed and nourished by the consciousness of Jane and Gary Simmons and the work that they have done to help uplift the consciousness of us all. And sweet Spirit, we also ask for all of those here on our prayer list at Unity of Tustin and all of those in our minds and hearts be added to the sacred space as we spend a few moments centering in the stillness, in the silence. And as we return to this now moment, with our minds centered in our hearts, let us consider these wise words from Sue Monk Kidd. What has happened to our ability to dwell in unknowing, to live inside a question, and coexist with the tensions of uncertainty? Where is our willingness to incubate pain and let it birth something new? What has happened to patient unfolding, to endurance? These things are what form the ground of waiting. And if you look carefully, you'll see that they're also the seedbed of creativity and growth, which allows us to do the daring and to break through to newness. Creativity flourishes not in certainty, but in questions. Growth germinates not in tent dwellings, but in upheaval. Yet the seduction is always security rather than venturing, instant knowing rather than deliberate waiting. And now we have come to the time for our conscious conversation with Gary and Jane. I am delighted to introduce our guests, Gary and Jane Simmons. Reverend Dr. Gary Simmons is an ordained minister for 35 years who has pioneered 3 Unity churches, served on the board of trustees of the Association of Unity Churches International, and was director of peacemaking services and assistant vice president of integral operations. Dr. Simmons is the author of the beloved The Eye of the Storm, co-author of The Art and Practice of Living with Nothing and No One is Against You, and his latest book is The Soul's Conspiracy, Master Conflict and Transform Your Life. The Reverend Dr. Jane Simmons is a heart-centered speaker, author, educator, and ordained Unity minister since 1999. She served for 7 years as the International Teen Ministry Coordinator for Unity Worldwide Ministries, is author of Eye of the Storm for Teens, and is also the co-author of Who Have You Come Here to Be? 101 Possibilities for Contemplation. Dr. Simmons' spiritual wisdom and strategies to develop heart coherence are an integral part of the Q effect. And Jane and Gary have just completed their 5-year tenure as co-ministers of Unity Spiritual Center in Spokane, Washington, with the intention to co-create a new ministry practice based upon integral principles, shadow work, and the fulfillment of purpose in people's lives, all undergirded by a transition from a minister-centric to a ministry-centric whole approach. So based on lessons learned, they are now in the process of creating a year-long certificate internship program to teach a replicable, methodological living process to bring spiritual organizations into second-tier consciousness, now known as integral ministry practice, which we're going to be focusing on today. So welcome, Jerry and Jane, to Unity of Tustin's Conscious Conversations.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. We are delighted. And I can say, as a fellow evolutionary, I've been excited by your work to up-level both individual and organizational consciousness. You know, I see you both as creating new wineskins and new wine for integral ministry practice. And I'd love for you to flesh out what integral ministry practice is. But before you do, perhaps you can share with us what you were experiencing in ministry that helped you discern the need for an evolutionary ministry model in the first place.
Sure. So as you mentioned in the introduction, I've been Director of Peacemaking Services and Assistant Vice President of Integral Operations at Unity Worldwide's home office. And so I did my doctoral dissertation on applying integral theory and spiral dynamics to issues of church growth and development. And after I did my doctoral dissertation, Ken Wilber and Jane and I connected, and I wrote an article for his Journal of Integral Theory and Practice. Basically, my perspective is that we have basically a 400-year-old ministry practice that is centered around the kind of patriarchal system where you have the minister as the surrogate parent of the spiritual community. And that ministry practice is archaic, and especially in these times when we cannot rely upon the traditions that congregational ministry has enjoyed over the years, such as folks practicing tithing and supporting the ministry through their own sense of generosity and abundance. Right now, 9 out of 10 churches are in decline, and declining attendance as well as financial support means that our current ministry practice is not aligned with the emergence of what's happening in the world today. And so Jane and I began to formulate in our own hearts and minds a different approach, applying Wilber's integral theory to the actual dynamic of congregational ministry. We candidated at Unity Spiritual Center Spokane specifically for the purpose of implementing this new ministry practice. We were fortunate enough to have a congregation that welcomed our just bringing forth, bring it on, they said, bring it on. Jane, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So this has been really Gary's arena, much more than mine. And I kind of followed along behind him saying, all right, let's try it. But I did eventually find my own way in helping to create something new. And it was more in the sort of softer parts of it. So there was a lot of things that I was into, like a cultural paradigm shifts into a more kinder, more compassionate world. And how do you do that? And so spiral dynamics I was very, very interested in self-compassion and how I really believe that if we all learned self-compassion, wars would end tomorrow. I have a theory there. Trauma, inherited trauma, and how that shows up in our world right now, the sort of otherness that's gone on. And so my focus has been much more on how do we cultivate those things that are part of cultural shifts, that we can't just slap on some organizational changes and there's got to be another part to it. So if you look at the 4-quadrant arena, I was really much more on the left quadrants, the internal consciousness raising as well as the cultural shifting. And so I found my niche in there. And in fact, I found my passion. It wasn't just a niche. It was, I really got the power, the transformational power of these things and the need to teach them. And so I've been teaching those things and learning. That's the other thing. I think one of the things I brought to the table was that I was Gary's biggest student, you see, because there was so much to learn. And for me, it was like, oh, wait a minute, this is too, I can't kind of grasp this, I mean, Ken Wilber he's an acquired taste. And so the more I studied, and then I was able to put it in simpler terms or help to, for my own understanding, I think that was helpful in actually bringing it to the broader group, because people they just need to, it was a way of teaching it that made it understandable and reachable and relatable. That's really important in the whole thing.
Yeah, I see you both as being spiritual scientists, doing real life experiments to see how do we get from that archaic model to a new model, and what is that process, and then how can you track the successes so everyone doesn't have to recreate the wheel from scratch. And you're using words like change and transformation and learning. And I know Charles and Myrtle Fillmore wrote extensively about the spiritual importance of evolution and how one of our tenets is to unfold more God into the world. And you seem to be, that seems to be underpinning some of your work. So where does the evolution of consciousness fit into integral ministry practice, and how is it coherent with our foundational unity teachings?
So let me first talk a little bit more about what the integral ministry practice is, and then say something also about, you raise a great point about transitioning, because the real work is figuring out how to go from where we are to where we need to be evolving to. And that's my gift. That's the specialty that I bring to this project is that all the ways in which these last 5 years have unfolded, we've intentionally brought forth experiences that evolved the organization. I'll be more specific about that. But suffice to say that an integral ministry practice, if you're familiar with spiral dynamics, it's grounded in second tier imperatives. So in spiral dynamics, there's a distinction between first tier and second tier. First tier are subsistent levels of being. In other words, we're constantly coping with what's happening outside of us, and therefore needing to have things be a certain way in order for us to feel safe and okay. In second tier, we live in the context of being who we've come here to be. And so it's not dependent upon what's happening out there. It's dependent upon who I am becoming, what's unfolding within me. And so in some respects, this is where the consciousness is associated with this, because as we really look at consciousness in the context of development, we will see that we have to develop consciousness if we're to evolve the organization. That's just the bottom line of it. But the other aspect of the integral ministry practice is that it informs us that the organization is a living system. In other words, we have to understand that as a living system, There's the internal dimension, the being dimension, and the external dimension, the doing dimension. There is also the agency dimension and the collective dimension of the whole living organism. And if we were to evolve the organism, we have to what's called tetra-evolve, or work with all quadrants simultaneously. The consciousness quadrant, the cultural quadrant, forgive me, the social system, and the organizational structures, practices, and systems. All of those arenas of development need to move into second tier imperatives as opposed to subsistent level imperatives.
Would it be helpful if I share a model that you have in your blog? Maybe if I share my screen just for a moment. I don't want to do too much with this, but
sure.
I believe that's the model you're talking about, correct?
Well, this is the diagram that illustrates how we apply integral theory to the whole system that congregational ministry is.
And just for our viewers, we have 4 quadrants. The upper left, which is about kind of internal intentionality. The lower left is that interface between the individual and the collective, the we quadrant. The upper right, which you have as organizational kind of behaviors. And the lower and the upper, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting it wrong, but the upper right is the social systems, which is more like the culture. So you're saying that in order for organizations to evolve, they need to be tetra activated, that we can't just concentrate on one quadrant, but all quadrants have to be simultaneously addressed, worked with, engaged, evolved in order to move into a new tier, into a new way of our center of gravity being in being rather than doing.
Right. And another way to look at this is that if we think about transitioning where we are right now, which we can describe as a first tier model or a minister-centric ministry practice, and if we know that we're evolving to a different place, second tier, and we're looking at organizing our community around the fulfillment of our purpose, what informs our transitional process is that we have to create experiences that work with all the quadrants. So we had an approach, we had a strategic approach with respect to how to basically wake up, grow up, clean up, and show up. If there are not these 4 elements of working within oneself and as well as in the organization, we're not opening the portal to second tier yet. And so part of Jane and my approach was Jane taught development right off the bat to our congregation. We also began the shadow work program, beginning to work on cleaning up, as well as teaching about the idea of growing in our emotional intelligence, our spiritual intelligence, as well as our transformational intelligence. We began to introduce experiences which caused the community to be not only aware that development is important, but also given a practice. We as you've mentioned, created a shadow work program called the Q process, which is now called the quantum process. And the reason why this was important, because we had to have a coherence around creating a tipping point. And that can only happen when people are in a common practice of doing the very same thing with respect to the effort to be healthy in the presence of one's discomfort. And so as the ministry gradually took on this practice as it became institutionalized, over the 5 years, everyone had gone through most everyone had gone through the Q process several times. And by the end of our 5-year tender, over 400 people have gone through the Q process in this ministry of 150 people. Wow. And so the idea is that when people recognize that they no longer have to look outside of themselves for their sense of well-being and worth, and when everybody kind of recognizes that second tier is all about who we've come here to be, it unleashes a dimension of the community's capacity to create and be innovative. And so we were also able to help the leadership understand that the organizational discomforts in the church church are really organizational drivers. We're not here to fix the past or so much as we are to see that the challenges of our past are the unintended consequences of a ministry practice that is grounded in first-tier imperatives. And so that's the essence of why we're so focused on evolving and developing our congregation.
A couple of things come to me. One is that it seems some of the reason for spiritual community starts to expand. Part of spiritual community is to support individuals in being who they've come here to be. And how does the culture of the community get underneath each person so that we have the boldness or the courage to express in different ways?
Right. So you mentioned the we space, the culture and the social system in the lower quadrants. So we introduced spirit groups, a small group ministry program that Mindy has created, because her particular system of spirit groups, small group ministry, has a special component to it that really is aligned with the integral ministry practice. And so we have found that people's transformative experience doesn't necessarily happen on Sundays, because it's just it's a top down.
It's a dose. It's a good dose to keep you going. Yes. Right.
So the real transformation happens in people's lives when they're connected to each other and they're really sharing at depth and feeling a sense of safety and security in their own little community. So.
There's a term that was in one of your recent blogs that I've never seen these words put together this way. It was spiritually motivated social activism. What do you mean by this term? What quadrant does it belong in? And what's its role in organizational evolution?
Go for it, Jane.
Yeah, so spiritually motivated social action is where you're taking action from a different place than if you're just doing social action work. We certainly support doing, taking actions that are blessing the community and taking care of other people. And, we have lots of that kind of, we did before COVID, we had lots of people, going to the homeless shelters and doing work and that sort of thing. When you get into the sort of spiritually motivated aspect of it, you're coming from a different place. First of all, you're finding your own heart center first, and you're cleaning up any blockages that are keeping the divine love at the center of your core from being expressed. And so that cleaning up aspect of it is really important. If we go on a peace march and we're angry at the world, it's just really adding to the collective, misery. And so it involves two parts to it: turning within, discovering the blockages that are keeping us from being who we've come here to be, and doing the integration work that helps that to stop being an issue in our life. It stops the conditioned behaviors, the unconscious kind of reactivity that we might have. Once we have a much more clear avenue for being divine love and expression, then it's taking action from that space. And it has a much different experience for someone when we're being who we've come here to be and doing this loving work. It makes a difference. It truly makes a difference.
It sounds almost like a heart emanation rather than a strategy.
Exactly. It's Heart Math teaches a lot of really good work on coherence, about creating coherence, and it's measurable what a difference it makes, and not just in your own bodies and your own life, but when you are taking action and being that presence of peace and love and gratitude, it affects the energetic field. And it really adds something to the collective consciousness. And, oftentimes we feel like, oh, what's my little prayer going to do here? But seriously, it has a cumulative effect. That's the thing I love about it most. The more often you practice it, the more your baseline changes, so that if you want to become a more compassionate person, you do this heart work, you take actions that give you a feeling of being compassionate. And the more you do that, we create neural architecture that, becomes a more compassionate way of being in life. And it's just sort of starts coming natural to us. But not only that, every time we do a loving kindness meditation, every time we go into coherence, we send love, we are adding that to the collective consciousness. And make no mistake about it, it is a powerful process to do that. And that gives me hope that we can help to change this world.
It sounds like a knowing that no act of love is ever wasted. That it adds to even what's available for the collective. That it might even have its own sphere of existence that we add to and then can even draw from.
Yeah, I was just listening to some work by a man named Thomas, I think, Hubel, who does work with trauma and large groups, collective trauma. And he says, we are born into a pre-traumatized field. It's just part of being human. You come on in and you're dealing, and we're swimming in it and we don't even know it. And when sometimes that can feel like, well, how is there, what's even possible for us as a human family when we're all in this stuff? But then when we realize we can do this work, and it is helping to calm that field, it's helping, it's adding to the healing aspects that can be as part of our collective as well. So yes,
and from that transcend and include perspective, even the traumatic field isn't wasted. It's the ground from which we can bring forward more love.
Exactly. And that's one of the major components of integral ministry, is using what is as an evolutionary driver. It no longer becomes, oh, this is how it is for me. And, it becomes, how can I use this to grow beyond my yesterday self and become so much more? And it really can drive our evolution to another level.
It's even a different way of orienting in the world. It's not so much that I have to do anything. It's almost like I have to stay still and let life come to me. And whatever comes to me is my next step. And there's that much coherence in this way of being in the world.
Yes, because when we do this work, we actually raise our own vibrational, signature to a certain level where those things can now emerge. It helps with the emergence of what it is we're looking for. So you're right, it's not a forcing or I'm going to make this happen. We rise to the level of what already is, that it already exists, because it's the reality of who we are and what we're about. And so when we rise to that level and sustain it, now we create the conditions where something new can now just emerge. And it's more of an acceptance and a welcoming. Part of the work we're trying to learn as well how to do is, we're really on the cusp of something new coming forth. And we have to know how to hospice what's leaving, and at the same time midwife what's coming. And the problem is we don't really have a clear idea of what that is. And so it's a really interesting dichotomy of, this is what it means to be a spiritual practitioner.
In our community right now, we're studying and working with Susan Beaumont's book, How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it is about this reality of us, the spiritual capacity to let go of what's no longer working and be in that liminal space of emergence, even though we don't know what's yet coming. And we actually need a lot of support and skills and development in order to tolerate that lack of reference points, so that we can become a vehicle for, I think, what we would call the field of infinite possibilities. Like that's almost how we get there. And I don't exactly know how, but I feel it's probably connected. You mentioned a word I'm also not familiar with, the chaotic path.
Yes.
Is that similar to liminal space? What do you mean by the chaotic path, and what's its role in personal and organizational evolution?
So you can Google the chaotic path and find out more specific information. But the way that I use it, I want to contrast the chaotic path with the first tier default way in which leaders are, and that's predict and control. So in other words, when we're grounded in first tier, we have to know things in order to feel safe and okay. And predict and control has its place, especially if you're going to be selling your property and buying something new. You want to make sure that the situation is the right thing to do. But for so much, what faces us triggers us first, and then we try to work with the dynamic based upon our own personal coping strategies. But for church organizations, leaders need to differentiate their own discomfort from the organizational dynamics that need to be embraced. And so part of the chaotic path recognizes that if we have too much control, which means that we want things just the way they are, we want order. And if we're too crazy, chaos, we can't work with that. So we have to be capable of being comfortable in the discomfort. And that's really a sign of second tier leadership, is the capacity to be okay with the ambiguity, the uncertainty, the discomfort, because we all understand what emergence is. Emergence is that there's an intelligence that is seeking to, within all living systems, to evolve and to bring us into a greater expression of our capacity to matter in this world. And if we don't understand that those impulses are alive right now, we won't align with them. Instead, we'll try to fix or control, or otherwise try to have things the way that makes us feel okay. But second tier leaders use what they have as if it's their abundance. In other words, whatever is going on, we're going to treat it as if it's our abundance. And when we do that, we may not know how it could be our abundance, but see, that's the journey, to be in that question. How can we use what we're having right now as if it's our abundance, and see it as a stepping stone to a future that we're seeking to create? So part of integral ministry practice is knowing that we're creating something that does not exist in the outer world necessarily in its fullness right now. And so we have to be capable of having the capacity to be in the process of discerning what is ours to do based upon the reality that we are always interconnected. We live in what Wilber calls the cosmos with the capital K. And if we recognize that we're capable of manifesting a greater good by virtue of who and what we've come here to be, if we're paying attention to being present to life, being as if we're welcoming what's going on, as if it's for us, then we open up that field of infinite possibilities that you presence. That's the key to evolving into the integral ministry practice.
And I say this with discernment, but when there's conflict, let's say, especially in our spiritual communities, our basic self, our unconscious self, is likely to be activated. But the part of us that knows truly should be celebrating. Like, this is the field of emergence. There almost needs to be a little stress, or needs to be a little tension, in order for there to be that field for something new to create. And I love how you termed it abundance, that our conflictual space is an abundant space. And we might want to celebrate it, and this is probably too far, but even elongate it, at least not rush to shut it down.
Well, yes, absolutely. And so the key, which is sort of my ministry, is to figure things out. And so part of what we've done these last 5 years is we've created a system that can be replicated. So I have coaching clients now I have one ministry that is starting their fourth year of being one of my coaching clients, and they are experiencing all of the benefits that we have experienced. So this is something that is capable of being replicated, but it's not about just doing these things that we've created. It's about evolving into the consciousness upon which these things can come forth. And so that's why the shadow work program is so integral to this part, because we can't have people projecting their stuff on each other and evolve our churches. It's just not.
And in order for it to be replicated, it doesn't mean each ministry is going to wind up the same way, because if we did, that would be more predict and control. It's almost creating the infrastructure, and then what emerges is going to be individual, which is kind of interesting to think of. Fascinating. So I am curious, with all of your time and work in this field, in moving from the theoretical to the pragmatic, to creating programs to bring us forward in each quadrant of consciousness, have you seen it work? Do you see individuals emerging with an expanded capacity to love, be in the discomfort, agree to disagree in love? Are you seeing organizations that have different ways of functioning and are moving into a more like an orchestra rather than a family? Is it working?
So we can only speak to our experience and my client's experience with respect to our specific approach to evolving our churches. But I'm certain that what you've just expressed is a part of New Thought spiritual practice in terms of churches and stuff. But you know, it was our effort to try to our focus was to evolve was to teach them what we knew about cultural development, was to give them experiences that would help them evolve out of their sense of victimhood, the sense of not enough. The other key piece of all this is that we create a whole new funding model called the spiritual cooperative. And it's based upon the emotional and spiritual maturity of individuals, not a tithing practice. So in other words, we invite people to do what they can do in our effort to 100% underwrite the operational expenses of the church. And when people have more emotional and spiritual and transformational intelligence, they are less inclined to be triggered by what's happening. So that was our first effort, was we had to evolve the people, because the changes that we were going to bring on would push people into their discomfort. And absent of having a capacity to be present to their discomfort without projecting it, we wouldn't have evolved. So that's why we spent the first 2 or 3 years just focusing on evolving our congregation.
Got it. And one quick second, Jane, and I want to hear what you have to say, but putting some of this together, what's so interesting is one of those fields that is uncomfortable, that even presupposes your whole model, is the decline of New Thought and progressive and mainline churches. So that in itself is that area of abundance, where, and Jane, you were talking about this, where we truly, part of that maturity is being able to let go and let things fade away, so that there's room for, you know, the coherent emergence that wants to come forward to have space.
Yes, exactly. And so a lot of the evolution that I experienced was my own development as well. You know, we were developing along with everyone else. It's not like we came in and thought, oh, these people need emotional maturity. We were right in there. This is what we're doing as a human family. And so I know about my own level of growth that has happened, has been significant. And so, of course, we've retired now, and we've had to leave the congregation and let them, you know, we have, it's really ethically you know, we're called ethically to leave and to let them have their experience. And so we're kind of watching from afar, but feeling very, so we're going through all the emotion of that too. You know, it's hard to say goodbye, and especially all this special kind of adventure we've had with these folks, and so it's been harder for us to say goodbye to that. But from afar, I can see that they're retaining a lot of what we have been putting in. Now, I would say the longer you do this, the more results you're going to see. 5 years is, you know, it was about 5.5 by the time we left. And of course, we had a year of COVID in our last year where we couldn't be together physically. And, we, you know, we were already doing online stuff. We had to really ramp that up and all. So it was an odd year for that. But we managed to, okay, we're going to do the Q process, now the quantum living process online. We found a whole way of doing it strictly online. And you know, we've had to make some changes that way. Board meetings only online, staff meetings only online. And so it was a year of growth in a lot of ways because of that. Yeah. And it made my heart very, you know, just warm by seeing how everyone stepped up to it and put it into practice. Well, what would an integral ministry look like now with this? How can this be our abundance? Well, we can just really grow our online presence here. That's you know, we found ways of dealing with it. And so I really saw that emotional and spiritual maturity coming to fore when we were faced with this, and not just kind of dissolving and, oh God, that's the end of everything. It really did show up for us as, okay, this is the chaotic path right here. How can this be? You know, my new favorite term is the cataclysmic evolutionary catalyst, which means that whatever's happening becomes an evolutionary driver for the next shift and change. And so I would say, yes, I definitely saw changes, and I think our board would agree with that, our staff, you know, some of the things we implemented. You know, not everything was a home run, that's for sure. You
well,
know,
I'm sure trial and error is part of the space because we're moving into something that hasn't been created yet. So we're only going to find the next step almost by going off the path and then course correcting. So we need to stay in attention to ourselves and pay attention to what's emerging, because that is the cue of where we're supposed to go.
That's the midwifing aspect of it. And so I would say our greatest gift when we came to Spokane was the willingness of the congregation. The board was, talk about being on board from the get-go, but also the congregation. They said yes to this, so that it wasn't like we were trying to force something. They said yes so that we could have those, you know, hiccups along the way, and people weren't just like, oh, well, this, you know, this didn't work. They were willing to be on that, you know, ride with us. And so a lot of what we spoke about on a Sunday was about this. You know, we were talking about the hospice midwife aspect of it. I did a whole series on spiral dynamics to teach about paradigm shifts and cultural change and how it happens. And so people were with us on the journey the whole way.
So as we come to a close, I would love if we could do one quick thing just to give this a little more practical, concrete foundation. I'd love to bring up that slide of the 4 quadrants again. And I think we've reviewed some of it. Talk about what intervention or what kind of program did you use to target each one of these quadrants?
So let me just say that when you mentioned, this is a common conclusion, that how do we work with each individual quadrant? And so the approach is you create experiences that exercise all quadrants simultaneously.
Okay. Yeah, it's a big difference.
So what things can you do that everyone is exposed to, that helps everyone evolve and grow? Well, teach development, do shadow work, do small group ministries. All of those programs tetra evolve all of the quadrants simultaneously.
And handle what comes your way, maybe being the biggest practice of all.
Yeah.
So I know you're coming up with a coaching program. You know, some people in my community or other people watching this might be like, well, you know, this might be a good match for our church. But yet it's extensive. It's not a small undertaking, and it takes a very comprehensive approach over time. But for people who do want to really dive in, where are you with the coaching program that you're developing, or what are some next steps that we or other communities could take?
Okay, so all my clients had to go through a process of learning all about mission-centric ministry and integral ministry practice. So on my website, my blog site, drgarysimmons.com, I have links to hundreds of videos on all the things that we've created, as well as I'm now working diligently to create blog posts that will be converted into a book that hopefully Wilbur will endorse and write a foreword to, as well as we're in the process of creating an internship certificate program, a year-long program for individuals that want to be certified, or for ministerial candidates who have an internship requirement can train with us for a year, and we'll give them the capacity to facilitate all the things that we have created, and so we're I'm not in the process of necessarily taking on new clients, although I'm happy to do that. But it takes a while for folks to really know what they're getting into, and then once they're into it, I have three stipulations, three requirements. If they won't take on these three things, then I can't use them as a client. The first is they have to be committed to the quantum process, quantum living process, the Q effect. So you have to get your own in-house Q process facilitator. The second thing is that you have to work spirit groups into your program, because spirit groups is a transformational partner to the integral ministry practice. And then the third thing is that you are required to take on a practice mission statement, transforming lives and inspiring people to make a positive difference in our world, because that statement is connected to the funding model, the membership process. Everything becomes a metaphor for the journey of transformation. The labyrinth walk is a metaphor, and we tie our mission statement to the two phases of the labyrinth walk. The first phase is the transforming lives, where I'm working on myself. The return, the second phase of the labyrinth walk, is giving back, inspiring people to make a positive difference in our world. So we've created a way in which that if a ministry is willing to do those three things, then they're open enough, progressive enough to kind of take the deep dive. A lot of churches aren't willing to do this, and so I can't work with them, because this is what I've created, is the systematic approach to developing these programs, and it requires those three elements in order for me to be an effective facilitator or support an effective effort to implement this program.
It reminds me of almost geometries, that each geometry has some initial axioms and postulates, and then everything unfolds from that. And there are some foundational requirements that are needed in order to create the conditions for second tier consciousness to even have a shot. And I can see it's interesting to me that the mission statement is directed. It's not created, but it seems like that's been distilled by you both over a lot of time. And it's important because that's going to drive all the decisions. It's not going to be based on opinion or getting away from the minister-centric model. It's not about the minister. It's about what serves that mission. And it sounds like your mission is the mission into second tier.
I think we found a key, and you know, so all there's some really great books on what this arena is all about. One is called Coming Waves, and it talks about those four cornerstones of the transformational journey: waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. And when we are intentionally living those principles in our ministry, we can't help but to evolve into an integral ministry practice.
Wow, that's very hopeful. It almost becomes inevitable. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I thank you both so much. Is there any last closing words you would want? I would like to talk to you for hours, but that wasn't the deal we made. So is there any closing remarks you have before we end for today?
So we're always happy to visit with ministry leaders about our work. And if your community is interested in understanding more deeply, we're happy to schedule a Zoom, and we can do it for an hour and a half if we want, and just see where it goes. So
that's wonderful. Yes, please, Jane.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been wonderful to talk to you, and I feel very hopeful for our movement, that I think there's enough interest, there's enough understanding that what we're doing isn't working, and if you just keep doing the same things over and over again expecting a different result, we all know how that goes. And so there's a movement toward a change that I think is really going to make a difference in the world. And so thank you for letting us just kind of talk about that today. It was really wonderful, and very much appreciate you and your consciousness to talk to today. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege. And I have been following your work for a long time. So it's really special for me to have this time with you as well. So thank you very much for being part of our conscious conversation. And hopefully it will be a continuing conversation. Blessings to you both.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So now I would like you to join with me in our celebration of abundance, where we have the opportunity to share our financial gifts with our ministry. Unity of Tustin is sustained solely by love offerings. Our buildings, these sacred, beautiful gardens, the spiritual education for ourselves and our children, the fellowship and love we share, all happen because we share of our financial gifts. So to make a contribution, please go to our website and click on donate, or on the text box above this video. We are abundantly blessed by these gifts as a demonstration of divine prosperity flowing to provide for our community. And I invite you to affirm our love offering blessing with me. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. And thank you all for joining this evening. And please join us for next week's Conscious Conversation at 6 p.m., which will be hosted by our spiritual ministry team member, Craig Stephen Phillips. So now let's end our evening together with the prayer of protection, embellished with some of our Youth of Unity gestures. So let's do this together now. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever I am, God is, and all is well. Good night to everyone, and have a blessed week.
Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of life. Get ready, my soul. Everything I've ever done, everything I've ever seen, everything I've lost or won, everything I've ever dreamed has brought me here to the present moment, here to a new beginning, here, and I'm seeing life so clearly now. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of life. Get ready, my soul. 'Cause here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, closer, closer, closer to my sacred source. Here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, closer, closer, closer to my sacred source. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in into the deepest kind of love, into the sweetest kind of life. Get ready, my soul. Get ready, my soul.